Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3 Episode 6 was quite good actually. It was a solid episode, solid by Jujutsu Kaisen standards, filled with that trademark Goshizono flair, fantastic direction, a fair bit of animation muscle and strong drawings. It was a decent effort all around. Now yes, neither was it a ridiculous action spectacle like episode 4, nor did it feature an insanely ambitious sequence like the end of episode 5, but it was still a very enjoyable watch, with plenty worth appreciating and a bit worth critiquing in the visual department. Here's the thing, even high-profile productions like Jujutsu Kaisen need to slow things down a bit at some point. Regardless of how ambitious the team is, some episodes simply don't look as insane as the rest. That's just how TV anime works, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as they don't let the quality drop too far down, which wasn't the case here. Or was, whichever works grammatically. Like I said, solid looking episode all around, and as such, let's break down the visuals. Make sure to subscribe. That would be a very solid thing to do. I don't even know what that means. Just subscribe, it takes a second, do it. You can also become a member of this channel. Members get at least 2 exclusive videos per month, custom badges and emojis, shoutouts and more. Just go down there and press the join button. As always, let's start with the staff list. This episode was directed by Seimei Kidokoro, a fairly experienced director with plenty of interesting projects under his belt, and storyboarded once again for the 6th time in a row by series director Shota Goshizono, which is an insane feat in and of itself, and that's doubly true given how consistently complex and interesting the storyboards have been. As per usual, this episode was really well directed and storyboarded, although like I said near the start, it was a bit tame compared to the rest. Of course, that doesn't mean the episode was bad, average, or even just good. It was great, but I hope you guys get what I mean. It is a TV anime. At the end of the day, it has to slow things down a bit. At some point, I'll elaborate in a bit. Over on the animation front, things were a bit messy. You had one chief animation director, character designer Yosuke Yajima, which is great, 6 animation directors and 2 assistant animation directors, which is questionable, and a whopping 60 second key animators, which is not good. I don't know how else to put it. Alright, look, let's address this second key animator fiasco for a bit. I glossed over it in my previous video, but since there's a lot of misinformation floating around online, let's clear a few things up. Why not? Also, just so you know, none of what I'm about to say applies exclusively to Jujutsu Kaisen. JJK is one of the worst offenders, but it applies to pretty much every high-profile, semi-high-profile production ever. JJK is just one of many. For those of you who aren't familiar with the anime production pipeline, well, first off, please don't click off. I know all of this sounds like uninteresting nerd talk, but I promise you'll learn something, just keep watching. Anyway, as I was saying, for those of you who don't know how anime is made, second key animation is basically cleanup. It's a group of usually less experienced artists cleaning up the rough layouts drawn by key animators, because said key animators didn't have the time to do so themselves. Now, as a general rule of thumb, a lengthy second key animator list is usually indicative of a messy production. That's common knowledge, but for some reason, some JJK fans seem to think otherwise. According to them, second KA counts don't matter, they just don't. I even saw some people say it's AD counts that are more significant instead of second KA counts, which was particularly funny because it's actually the other way around. Look, I'll keep things brief because we have an entire episode to go through, but basically, besides a few rare examples, second key animation is an unnecessary step. Ideally, it shouldn't even exist. Animation direction should, it's part of the pipeline, but second key animation shouldn't. How many second key animators do you think Kyoto Animation City, aka an ideal production, had? That's right, 0. Sadly, in the real world, mass cleanup is pretty much the norm these days, and make no mistake, that applies to every single high-profile show, not just Jujutsu Kaisen. The new Sentenced to be a Hero episode has a whopping 80 plus second key animators, which is absolutely f***ing ridiculous, and Fate's Strange Fake and Sum of Frieren isn't too far behind. It's everywhere and it's not good, it really isn't. Now yes, I'm not an animator myself, but I have heard from plenty of pros, both new guys and veterans, and both publicly and privately, and most seem to agree that this mass cleanup model isn't exactly ideal. Because of it, you'd have layout animators who never get to see and implement the corrections made to their work, which is kinda like appearing for an exam, having your teacher grade it but never getting the paper back. How are you supposed to know what your mistakes are and learn from them? You also have artistic nuances and polish that get lost, you have corrections that don't get implemented properly, it's just not good. Let's not normalize this inherently detrimental step. Now back to JJK land. Yes, I'm sure this episode wasn't exactly last minute. I'm sure they planned to hire a bunch of second key animators from the start and structured the production accordingly, but I think that's worse. With other messier productions, at least we know the original intention was for the animators to clean up their own layouts. That to me is better than just rolling over and going, yup, it's impossible to make an ambitious episode without mass cleanup, so might as well just give up. That's worse, right? What do I know, I'm just a moron on the internet. Let's move on. 60 fucking second key animators. The Chainsaw Man movie, which was 5 times as long, had just over 150 second key animators, and even that was considered to be a bit much. Come on. Anyway, too much yapping, let's finally go through this episode scene by scene. Now, like I said near the start, this episode wasn't exactly a top-to-bottom sakuga fest. It had animation highlights, mainly in the form of short bursts of cool-looking action, but overall it wasn't mind-blowing animation-wise by JJK standards, and as such, I'll focus more on Goshizono's storyboarding this time around, more so than usual that is. What Goshizono did a lot in this episode was use what I like to call extended layouts. Basically, a shot, mainly the background component of it, would extend long past the frame, allowing the camera to pan and reveal an entirely different composition and perspective without changing the shot. This opening cut, for example, you had the standard frame of the pillars going all the way back into the darkness, a fairly complete composition, right? Well, the camera then panned to the right, revealing an entirely new composition complete with different character placements. Behind the scenes, the layout animator for this shot had to, lay out the camera pan in the animation, and the background artist had to draw the entire sideways background as one frame, with both ends perfectly blending in the middle. Quite complex, yes, but very much worth it in my opinion. In some shots, this transition between two compositions was actually warped instead of straight. This one, for example, they started with composition A, went past composition B and onto composition C with the stairs, and in the process you could see the warp in the background. Similarly, they panned back and forth multiple times across this warped background, presenting one conversation with minimal movement in an extremely dynamic and visually interesting manner. Really cool stuff. Goshizono's brain is an interesting place. More about the backgrounds, I loved the layering here. The pillars were divided into individual background layers with varying degrees of depth of field blur, drawing your eyes towards the point of interest. Also big fan of the pastel-like light coming off these street lamps, pretty sure it's part of the background illustration. The background art department was working overtime in this episode and I loved it. Moving on, animation-wise, there wasn't all that much happening, but it wasn't exactly static either. I appreciate the subtle acting near the start, although the animation itself was fairly janky and inconsistent. This perspective was quite cool, especially for a shot that actually moved. Plus some goofy, bouncy body language in this shot, followed by a cool bit of morphing animation that was then chopped up and reversed. More background black magic, complete with some slightly stiff but cool animation and these strong drawings with thick uneven lines on the dog. Not part of the animation, but I loved the subtle rim lighting added by the compositing team here. We had a fair bit of cool stuff, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We then got to our first short burst of action, which started with some really well drawn hands and a lot of what technically counts as morphing animation. This sequence was animated by Sadamasa Shika and it was quite cool. Big fan of the way the rabbits basically blend together into one mass, makes the animation process a lot easier and looks very cool. Of course, that style isn't exclusive to this episode. The actual animation in this sequence wasn't perfect. Fushiguro hair isn't exactly well drawn and the lines are fairly inconsistent, but still solid work all around. Particularly fond of the extreme fisheye perspective near the end. The sequence that followed Shika's work was arguably the most impressive thing about this episode. It was presumably animated by Genta Ishimori, yes, of Tandadan fame. He was here under a pen name, and it was so good. We started with some really cool effects animation. The mass of rabbits was basically treated like smoke with sharp inorganic shapes and three-tone shading. We then got this shot with the rabbit smoke gaining an additional thick grey outline and these tremendous drawings with eye-catching hair animation, hand-drawn poles and these thick wobbly outlines and effects. Such a fun sequence, amazing work by Ishimori, presumably. Some additional background fuckery and strong eye-catching drawings then brought us to this quick but interesting shot. The style of compositing here was different. It had a very cinematic feel, complete with tons of steam effects and some bouncy character acting. A bit too bouncy perhaps, so bouncy that it started to veer off into inconsistency. Moving on, God bless Koshizono, that man had to make the most boring explanation imaginable look interesting. I don't envy him. Like I've said countless times before, mangaka Gege Akutami got a bit too heavy-handed with the yapping in this arc, and stuff like this is the consequence. Koshizono did his best, but let's just say that skip 5 seconds option was starting to look really attractive to me around this point. Anyway, let's do Koshizono a favor and skip 5 seconds our way to the next action scene. I loved how they hand animated the card, the shading on it, the unorthodox positions, all hand drawn, even the interior in this shot, it's all cell, all 2D, really impressive. Also insanely complex large-scale background animation here. The camera does a near 180 rotation and the two different characters, one vehicle and entire background was hand animated accordingly, absolutely ridiculous. The sequence finally came to a close with some fast-paced, fluid bit of fabric animation and this well-drawn slow-motion close-up of Panda with 3-tone shading, but the fight itself was far from over. We then got these fairly well-drawn close-ups with smooth hair animation and these crayon-like effects, although the zoomed-in duplicate superimposed on top made it a bit difficult to appreciate the drawings, followed by more of what I like to call background f***ery, including this shot which consisted entirely of 2 background layers with the camera tracking the pole and the compositing lighting the ground up accordingly, which was a very fun idea. Some surprisingly consistent slow motion movement here, followed by these amazing drawings, a CGI coin jump scare and a fantastic sense of ease in. I love how Kirara gradually speeds up as she gets closer to the camera. I love the snap. This was followed by some slow, heavy but somewhat inconsistent movement, more amazing drawings and the smoothest bit of rabbit throwing ever. Like seriously, I was caught off guard by how bouncy and fluid Fushiguro's movement was in this shot, really cool. Speaking of throwing rabbits, this shot was really fun. We started with a regular background, switched to stylish, colorful speed lines and then switched back and the animation was solid as well. Snappy, energetic movement, fantastic foreshortening and meticulous line placement followed by some buttery smooth rabbit animation, amazing work. This shot was solid, loved how the length of the pole was conveyed as it got closer to the camera, and this was followed by Shinya Kaneko's sequence, complete with some insanely large-scale background animation. Of course, both background animation shots were heavily 3D assisted, but still, that's a lot of shapes and lines. Also loved the 3-tone shading on Fushiguro's back and the way the compositing conveyed the backlighting, really impressive work. We then got this somewhat inconsistent shot, the lines shifted quite a bit and a couple of awkward looking cuts, one of which was a still and the other was almost static. Not exactly stellar action animation, but hey, at least we got these cool looking shots, some of them framed from the inside of the hand-drawn car interior and this solid looking explosion to end the fight. Immediately after the fight, we got some classic Shinsaku Kozuma effects with those trademark geometric shapes and edges and a pronounced red rim light on the characters, which, I don't know if one medium-sized fire under an open sky is enough to drown out an entire 50-foot radius in a bright red glow, but hey, the rule of cool, am I right? Anyway, the drawings around this section looked really good, directly corrected by character designer Yosuke Yajima so obviously, and there was a fair bit of acting. I loved how expressive Hakari was and how heavy his punches felt, stills and all, really impressive. Of course, it wasn't perfect, some of the animation was stiff, Hakari's walk here for example quite janky, same with these two running out of frame, but overall really solid work. Also quick shout out to this close-up, it conveyed so much intensity thanks in part to the sharp lines, the copious amounts of 2D hatching and the red bloom effect on the pupil. It was then followed by these amazing drawings, some solid looking fire and even more amazing drawings, really cool stuff. And that was the episode, pretty much the usual, really cool compositions, plenty of animation, although a bit tamer than usual, still amazing work. As always, I'm really looking forward to the upcoming episodes. Based on what I've heard, episode 8 and the finale are supposed to be the next 2 big episodes, so I can't wait. Again, looking forward to it. That's about it. A special thanks to Nude03, Amir, the Callus90 and Shiki-san for becoming tier 3 members, and until next time.